Like Amir's said in the beginning of this conference, one of the hopes that we have for a lot of the research that we have coming out of our research institutions is that it gets commercialized, and most typically that is accomplished by somebody leaving the lab and becoming the CEO. And so, if you've ever gotten anything done here in Southern California, or never knew what to do, or needed advice on regulatory affairs, I'm sure at some point you've reached out to Kwame Ulmer. So I'd like to welcome him to the stage as the moderator for our panel on MedTech CEOs, what it takes to succeed as a MedTech CEO. Thank you.
First, I'd like to thank UCLA for hosting this event, bringing back all the MedTech innovators in the ecosystem. Thank you, Matthew and Amir. And also, in some ways, a thought partner in this was our friends at AdvaMed. Ray Bruscusco is here. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention our conference, the AdvaMed conference, coming up in San Diego a few months from now. So this is a bit of a sneak peek of a type of conversation I think Ray would say would be occurring in San Diego in a few months. I'll start with introductions. Juliana Elstad is the CEO of Vibrato. Juliana is a seasoned CEO, board member, entrepreneur, and advisor with over 20 years of experience driving medtech innovation in startups and multi-billion-dollar organizations. She has a proven track record of creating, growing, and leading healthcare companies with a focus on building collaborative, dynamic cultures and mentoring high-potential leaders. Juliana brings deep expertise in strategy, business development, marketing, and a strong foundation in finance. Throughout her career, Juliana has founded companies, facilitated successful exits, with returns exceeding shareholders' expectations by over 100%. Juliana is currently a CEO of Vibrato Medical, an innovative vascular medtech company, and an independent board member of several healthcare organizations. Sonal Matai is the managing director and president of the U.S. business for Karl Storz Endoscopy, small operation based in Germany. I think I heard of them. Sonal is the man. He oversees 2,700 employees across R&D, manufacturing, and commercial operations, with a global career spanning over 2 decades in medical devices, consumer health, and B2C markets. He's held senior leadership roles at Karl Storz, Philips, GE, Onera Health. Previously, he led Karl Storz Endoscopy America, driving innovation and market expansion. Sonal has served as North American business leader for Philips, a $1.3 billion sleep and respiratory care division. He sits on the board of directors of California Life Sciences and is committed to advancing patient care. Sonal holds an MBA from IMD, Lausanne. I am not French. Hopefully I didn't mess that up. And a master's degree in philosophy and economics from the University of Pune. J.P. Hubschman, MD, is the CEO and co-founder of Horizon Surgical Systems, a pioneering company developing Polaris, an image-guided, AI-enabled robotic surgical platform with cataract surgery as its first application. Dr. Hubschman is also a former professor of ophthalmology and engineering at UCLA and an experienced and highly regarded eye surgeon with over 150 peer-reviewed papers, numerous book chapters, and leadership in multiple NIH and NEI-funded grants. He has been at the forefront of surgical innovation, passionate about the future of ophthalmic surgery. He's excited to lead Horizon in revolutionizing the field with robotic-assisted technology. Since its founding in 2021, Horizon Surgical Systems has made significant strides in advancing surgical robotics. The company has grown rapidly, attracting top-tier talent and forging strong industry partnerships. Its cutting-edge technology combines robotics, advanced medical imaging, and AI, setting a new standard for precision and efficiency in ophthalmic surgery. So some of us got together about 3 months ago, right around the time of the new administration, and we had an initial conversation, and everyone took out their crystal ball and projected out. Now we have more data, right? So we're going to ask you to think about what MedTech will look like across 4 topics for the next 12 to 18 months. And we'd love for you to share your experiences, lessons learned, and many of the audience are early stage company CEOs. So any practical, actionable advice that you think is important for them to consider. We're going to explore critical growth areas, and we'll bring up things like the T word, tariffs, and regulatory issues given the changes at the FDA. So with that, let's buckle up and dive in. We have 35 minutes to cover everything. Regulatory challenges. So anyone can start here. And so now, I want to get your take, because when we spoke about 3 months ago, you said, oh, we're going to monitor things. It's, maybe things will get worse, get better. What's your take on the FDA and regulatory in general now?
My take on regulatory over the next 12 to 18 months, or even if I project 24 months, is if you look at the FDA, I think the FDA, if anybody is sitting here from the FDA, they've been extremely strong partners to the industry to actually help and support, whether it comes to new breakthrough technologies or any new innovation. So I presume that will continue, right? So my hope is med devices, the life-saving equipment will continue. I think on the other factors, I think how European MDR, etc., and all those pieces react, I'm not sure. So I think the nationalistic tendencies that we see in multiple countries across, as we need to launch products all across the world and the globe, I think that's where we need to now balance in terms of what validations do we need to do, what kind of clinical trials, etc. And that will mean there'll be a cost increase, is my view. That'll happen if you want to launch in multiple countries. So that's an interesting piece that I'm seeing, is FDA has actually become more, corporate friendly, if I was to say, over the last, keeping in mind that patient, having the patient as the center and saying, okay, we need to drive patient safety and efficacy, etc. But they've also become very open to seeing how can technology be brought in.
Juliana, you're at a point in your journey where FDA may or may not be as top of mind in terms of milestones, but how are you thinking about things now?
Well, today I'm a little biased because I just had FDA pre-sub meeting yesterday, and it was one of my best ones. So I think FDA is great right now. But on a more serious note, I think over the last few months, there were concerns about layoffs at FDA. As many of you know, those people were mostly hired back. And the issue was that, once they started improving efficiency of FDA, which quickly became just lay off people, they realized that actually these people are paid partially through user fees that medical device companies do when we submit our applications. And if they lay off those people, that means they're not going to get those user fees. And then all these people were hired back, or at least were asked to return back. And then it's up to people if they come back or not. But in all of that, we as an industry spoke strongly together. And through the help of AdvaMed as our trade association represented, and actually in the previous years negotiated with FDA so that FDA is financed partially through these user fees. And these user fees had specific milestones, like how many FTEs does FDA need to have, so that all our submissions, FDA meetings are done with reasonable timeline. So I think, again, FDA, from what I see, continues to be a good partner. Yes, they're going to ask questions. They want to make sure that the technologies are safe, that they're effective, but they've been reasonable, and they seem to listen pretty well when we come and explain why certain things are the way they are.
JP, your technology, as we were chatting yesterday, is likely going to be de novo. And I know you're in the midst of gearing up for some first-in-human things of that nature. How are you thinking about interacting with the FDA, and what are your thoughts?
So a few things. First of all, the FDA in general is promoting early discussion. And so when we started the company a few years back, we started to engage with the FDA, and then we realized through QSub, it's a way to exchange and ask questions to the FDA. But we realized that actually it's not ideal to engage too early on before you really know the exact design of the system and the scope of all the features you will implement into the platform. So one of the advice I would like to give is make sure that before engaging with the FDA, you are sure about the design, you are sure about what you want to bring to market. That's number one. Number two is make sure as well that the regulatory pathway is aligned with your vision in terms of addressing the unmet need, commercial pathway, and everything, because you can get caught in some ways where there are some regulatory constraints, some technology constraints, some commercial constraints. So make sure that you align everything and you bring to the FDA a technology which can be easily approved, or at least through acceptable size of studies and timeline and so on. So for the FDA, as I said, we engaged early on. We had some exchange with QSub. It's really important to be well surrounded by very strong regulatory consultants who understand the space, who understand the technology, who can really advise you properly to make sure that your regulatory strategy is aligned and realistic.
Sonal, you said something I wanted to try and double click on. I think you're suggesting that as one of the potential outcomes of the disruption at the FDA and what's going on with EU and their regulatory framework, costs may go up a bit. You launch products throughout the world, and obviously, generally speaking, there are waves of markets that you want to enter. Do you think there may be going instead of going parallel, more serial? Do you suspect that you may tweak that, or that approach will be the same?
More or less similar, because timelines and, if you look at the sequence of markets that we generally tend to go to in med devices, remains, the US and the EU as our first markets, and then go to Japan, and then China FDA generally takes 18 to 24 months post the launch in the EU or getting a CE marking or an FDA marking. So I don't think that will change that dramatically in our business. So I'm not seeing that change. But I think, to what Juliana said, I think that's a very important point is, and I think the FDA is now going to be a little more stable after the rehiring of people. So I'm hoping that remains stable. And the cost will go up because I think you will need to do now multiple clinical trials. What is happening is, very interestingly, is I was just this morning on a call as well, not with the FDA, but with our own, reprocessing and sterilization team. They need to do 2 different trials for the same product for CE marking and FDA. So previously we could do a single trial with single, temperature, guardrails, etc. Now CE or MDR has changed those guardrails, so now you need to make a different test as well. So the cost will go up.
So I was talking to Amir a few weeks ago, and he said, Kwame, ask this question. So Amir, this is for you. The assets at UCLA, in past years, reaching a regulatory milestone was highly valuable, highly sought after. It was definitely something that's important. Where are we now in 2025? If you were looking at assets, IP at University of California, Los Angeles, or UVA, or any tier 1 research institution, how would you rate regulatory? Is it still critical? Are there things that are more important now, like reimbursement or other areas?
I'm sorry, the question is for, okay.
Anyone.
Okay, so do you want to do that?
Why don't you start?
I'm sorry?
You start.
Okay. So I think that UCLA is a great institution and really bringing, thanks to TDG, a lot of ideas and research program to successful company. I mean, they've been very supportive in bringing people and money and ideas and helping them build a company and be prepared for all the different challenges, like the regulatory challenge and making sure that you have reimbursement aligned with your technology and that you have the market. So TDD has been very helpful, and we spun off the company 4 years ago. We incubated at UCLA for more than 10 years, and we would not be where we are without TDG and the help of UCLA helping us spin off this program. So I would like to thank the TDG team. And really, they helped us getting ready in addressing all the questions, because when you have a research program, you don't really know. I mean, I was a faculty at UCLA. I've not been trained as a CEO, and I had an idea and a technology, but I didn't know how to bring it to market, and making sure that you get the help to realize all the challenges you will face and make sure that you're ready for it was super helpful. So thank you very much.
I think in answering your question, I think it's good to start with the final goal, which is we want to create companies that are profitable. In order to get to that level, FDA approval is not enough, because just because you have FDA approval, it does not mean that you will have a profitable business. To get to the profitable business, you do need reimbursement, and I think it becomes more and more important. I think if we look 10 years ago, FDA was, and even more, FDA was more challenging, and going through FDA was definitely a bigger barrier. And not that they are not a barrier now, but I think, again, their understanding of the medtech is getting better and better. And so that's why, especially if you do 510K technology where there is a predicate already, it's something you need, but it's not enough. Reimbursement, getting positive coverage decision for your technology is very important. The study was done over a year ago that says that in medtech, it takes on average 6 years from FDA approval to reimbursement decision, to positive decision from CMS. 6 years, that's a long time for all of your investors. And then you also need to demonstrate adoption. If you go right now and you want to do an IPO, if you have FDA, and even if you have positive coverage from CMS or private payers, bankers are not going to do your IPO. You typically need to have about $50 million in revenue and accelerating growth for that in order to do your IPO. Because again, market adoption is very important.
Sonal, did you want to add anything?
Oh, I think Juliana answered it. I think money. Keep this perspective, right? 25 is not an easy year, and it's not going to get easier from a financial markets perspective in terms of funding. Is there a funding, I would call it a funding cold, not a freeze, but a funding cold, and how investors are looking at things, and how even we are when we are investing. I think so all of us, right, need to be very prudent when it comes to money, right? So understanding your cash flow, understanding your burn rates, understanding how much talent can you hire at what time, etc., is significant. And if I was to say 24, 25, 26, I think they'll remain in the same vein. I think Juliana has said it. Reimbursement, having that, right? It's the FDA is a hygiene. You need to get that to at least be on the road. And then you have, your reimbursement that gets you off the road to get you driving, so that you can actually then capture the people on the road to say, okay, you're building a whole population that is using your instruments or using your technology. But for me, the big piece right now is money. And even as a large enterprise, my focus right now and our focus right now is very clearly how do we manage our profitability so that we're a sustainable business, because all the pieces have, created a little bit of a squeeze in our profitability right now.
I think for startups, though, time is the most important, because you raise your round of financing to reach certain milestones. Run as fast as you can to get to that milestones. I wouldn't delay it just to preserve the cash, because, again, you need to reach those milestones. The sooner you get there, the more your investors will love you.
Well, you segue perfectly into funding. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the drivers of why we think this is a chilly season, but then get to what can CEOs do right now. Should they try and extend runway? Should they race towards that milestone? Should they double whatever they think their capital raise should be? And anyone can jump in. What are your thoughts for the reasons why this will likely be another chilly year like 2024? I think it has to do with the macro environment and probably less IPOs. And then what is your advice for companies for 2025, this chilly season?
The environment is not good. I mean, we started the company in 21. We spun off at the time. The market was pretty good, and everybody was telling us, let's go and we'll get some money. And then 22 started to be a little bit colder, and 23 was even worse, and so on. So the good thing is we are lucky because we have a really interesting technology which will address a strong unmet need. But it's true that raising capital is difficult. So one advice I would give is, I think that finding strategic investors is critical currently because they validate your program. They demonstrate that there is a market, that there is an unmet need you will address. So having a strategic on your cap table really help. Funding through VCs and family offices. And the other thing I would say is making sure that you define properly the inflection point. You make sure that you know how much you raised to go to a point where you de-risk the company for new investors. And so defining the milestones, defining the critical inflection point, making sure that you have good investors around the table, because you need support from your investors. You may have good news, bad news sometimes. So you need to make sure that they understand the path and the journey. But again, for us, having a strategic since the beginning really helped us attract more investors.
So now when you, as a strategic, when you think about early stage companies to maybe make a bet on or invest in, are you looking particularly or only as a strategic investor, or do you want to see some financial return? Are you patient capital? Is that your perspective?
We as Karl Storz generally only tend to invest in technologies that are more aligned to our strategic vision and our 5-year ambition or 10-year ambition. So we don't look at profitability. So we don't go into saying that we're investing for reasons. So if it's aligned to where we want to be, we then are very good. And we bring in the technology very quickly into our fold so that we can then mature it and scale and commercialize it as we go forward.
Do you have any thoughts, Juliana? The perfect strategic?
Well, I think if you can get a strategic, get a strategic. And a good fit is important for all strategics. That's where you need to start. Because, again, as startups, as innovators, we can conquer the world. Strategics, with their scale, they have to worry about quality issues, recalls, all the things that can go wrong at big scale. So they, by nature, become more conservative. So if they want to become a minority investor with you, I would say do it. Just don't give them strategic rights, or at least strong strategic rights. And it also helps you beyond just the money. It brings credibility to whatever you do. It helps in other ways, introductions to KOLs, for example, helping you design whatever clinical work you need to do. There are a lot of benefits beyond that. That being said, I think in the last 3 months at least, strategics become more and more conservative. And that is because of overall economic uncertainty. As you heard from the strategic, they worry about their costs going up, whether it's because of tariffs, whether it's because they need to do more clinical trials, whether because something is going on with their current product. And when that happens, strategics always prioritize their current business that brings them profits and cash flow. And if they have to cut, they often cut on innovative things, especially things that are outside, right? Like not their internal. So first is going to be investments outside. Is probably the first line that's going to get cut. And then internal R&D if they have to do that. So, but if you can get a strategic, go for it.
That is great insight. And JP, I want to ask you, and then we'll go to the T word, tariffs. Is there time too early to seek strategic investment?
It's a good question. It's true that initially I was recommended not to bring strategic early on because it's kind of lock you somehow, but at the same time, VCs are getting more and more risk averse, and like evolving towards more like a PE kind of investors where they don't want to take too much risk. And so it's true that when you get one strategic as in the cap table, I mean, you need to make sure that they don't get too much right. I mean, that they don't block you completely. But I think that it's a good it's a good move for an early stage startup if you can get a strategic, because it's really, as I said before, it's validating your program, it's validating the unmet need, and it's really helping bringing some VCs and other family offices around the table.
That's very helpful. So when we were meeting a few months ago, one of the members of this dinner group was at a large organization, and tariffs were just starting to roll out. And that person at the time said, my costs in China for a clinical study went up by 40%. So now we have a little bit more clarity, a little bit more. What are your thoughts? And each of you have a unique perspective. How are tariffs impacting you right now?
So tariffs have a significant impact on us. As a global business, we are manufacturing in Europe and the US primarily, but most of our components as country of origin come from China. So with the tariffs that go across, both reciprocal from China to the US and US to China, as well as in EU with the 10% base tariff, we will see at least a 50 to 60% reduction in profitability, which is incredible. It is huge. So we now need to figure out how do we balance it. As Juliana put it, working on the policy side is one of our biggest levers, working with AdvaMed to see how as an industry can we work with the administration. I think the avenue of tariffs is what the administration is trying to do is probably the right thing. It is MedTech is about life-saving equipment, and we need to actually go to a zero tariff model for these life-saving equipment devices that we have. So I think working with AdvaMed, I think we're trying to do a lot around that, and as well as we're now looking internally of what can we do in terms of manufacturing strategy, in terms of sourcing, in terms of stockpiling, etc., to see how we can actually balance that. But the impact is significant. And if we go back, if on July 9th, after the 90-day period, it does change, the impact could be even more significant if by then different tariff treaties, etc., have not taken place and we've reached where we are today. So if it goes to 25% for Europe, that number only increases for us. So it's a huge impact.
For us, I mean, we manufacture robotic platform for testing, for preclinical and clinical studies. So it's not like a high volume manufacturing yet, but it's still impacting us. I mean, building those robotic platform are pretty. They were already pretty expensive, and with the tariff, the cost kind of jumped up like 30-40%. There's part coming from China, part coming from the US. The problem is, even when you look at those tariffs, when we were ordering some parts in China, and even with those tariffs, it's still cheaper sometimes to order them from China, and even the time to get the parts and so on is faster from China to the US, which is like sometimes very frustrating. So, I mean, it's true that when we'll have to manufacture high volume and so on, we'll be even more careful, but it's already impacting us quite a bit.
And I think no doubt tariffs impact large companies much more than they impact small business. But I think on small business, there are two ways, right? The supply chain, even if your manufacturer is in the US, there is high probability that if you look where they source their materials or their subcontractors, at some point, something crosses the border. And pricing is one component. Delays are also another one, because, again, people either want to buy fast and then it's inventory cost, or they say, okay, seems like there's going to be improvement. Let's wait, till that situation gets resolved, or at least gets more clarity. And that's delay, which as a small business, you cannot afford because you need to go. And second, small business, we want strategics to do very well, because when they do well, they need innovation more than ever. And so if it impacts Sonal's business, that means that there are some small businesses. And again, as we talk, strategics might get more conservative in the times of uncertainty.
That's really helpful. I heard a few themes, even at various stages in the size of and journey of your company. Tariffs have some impact. I didn't even think about the U.S. suppliers who are still getting their supplies from outside the U.S. And I didn't realize that the profitability hit could be so significant. But I do want to also acknowledge a theme around punching up by aligning yourself with trade associations that are really advocating, like AdvaMed did for the FDA. We have one or two more topics, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Talent. So for your companies, how do you think about attracting top talent now and then for the next 12 to 18 months?
So initially, we were lucky to have a strong network from UCLA to help recruit people, because I realized that when you know the people, or when they are like recommended by people in general, there's a better fit. But you can also use Hunter. It's a little bit more expensive. It's less predictable in terms of quality of the people. But I realized that the team is everything. Beyond the technology and everything, that what makes the success is really the team. And so recruiting the right people, not just for their technical skills, but also their human skills and personal skills. And it's even more important, I would say, that the technological strengths, because they can, if it's not the right person, they can be toxic in the company and create problems. So bringing the right people in the team is critical. And at Horizon, we have a very strong screening process, a lot of interviews, and we make sure that there's no one putting a veto on that person. So we make sure that we really bring only amazing people around in the team, and that's been very helpful so far, because as I said, the team is really everything.
Do new employees have to be able to speak German to join Karl Storz?
At a global enterprise, yes. If you do speak German, it helps, right? If you're multilingual, it always helps. You can always connect. I generally feel we're in the people business at the end of the day. Healthcare is about people. So hiring the right talent, as JP said, and bringing them in is most important. What we're trying to do to be better at, actually, you can only be better, is how do we forge better university partnerships to bring in better students at the early end of the career, so that they can be introduced into medtech and med devices and build a long career with us, as well as from mid-level recruiting. How do we attract the best talent and give the right kind of compensation structures, give the right kind of approach in terms of what they need to be in office, give them more flexibility in hybrid work, etc., so that we can drive that. And then I also think people want to work in winning organizations, right? Have the right quality of work that they can be winning. And that's what we're trying to drive, is we are winning, we are innovating, and that will also attract talent at both the mid-level and then the senior level as well. So a lot of work on this. This is our core function. That's my 100% of my job, if I was to look at, is to bring in the right people in our team and our organization so that we can keep growing.
I would like to add something, because these bringing people in, but keeping those people.
Exactly.
And actually building a culture where they feel safe environment, where they feel rewarded, when they feel they have autonomy. I mean, compensation is not like everything. I mean, it's important, but beyond compensation, being part of a team, having a straight and clear vision of what we are building together is critical. And the culture makes it super important.
I'll take a little bit different perspective, looking more as a small business on talent. So first, I agree that, if you have the right team, your job as a CEO becomes much, much easier, because you can go to this conference and make sure your team is working and know what they're doing. And I think as a small business, it's very important to tell the story, because especially the younger generation right now, they have hard time. Nobody looks at the career as a 30-year career and you work for a corporation and you keep building and moving up in the hierarchy. That's not what I think the current younger generation looks for. They want to make an impact. They want to be in a dynamic environment. They want to relate to the person, to the leader. So, and those are exactly perfect things for small business, because we can tell a story that is exciting, that, can really bring people and make them feel that they do the meaningful work, helping patients, improving quality of life, saving lives. MedTech has a wonderful story to tell. And I think that is important for talent.
Yeah. It's an easy story to tell for sure. So, Matthew, you're going to be proud of us. We're going to finish on time. Everybody's going to have a good hot meal. We have time for two. I was told 2 questions from the audience. Just 2, not 1, but 2. Yes. Yeah.
Hi, I am Marcella Ayala with Swinnerton. I'd like to know, I'm really curious in terms of speaking about the economy, the impact on your business. Thank you. I'm really curious to understand what you're looking to do in terms of your manufacturing strategy. How is that, are you on hold? Are you what are your options that you're contemplating? And is that incentivized you to actually grow or bring your manufacturing facilities here to the U.S.? So what does that look like? I'm just really curious about that.
Thank you, Marcella. As a company, we were actually growing our manufacturing footprint in the U.S. significantly. We employ close to 400 people in the Santa Barbara region in manufacturing and R&D. It's our largest hub globally for R&D. And we employ close to 100 people in the Houston area and close to 900 plus people in the Worcester area in Massachusetts. And we were actually increasing and scaling our Houston facility as well as our Worcester facility to actually bring in more manufacturing. So now what has happened is we're now doing more scenario planning to see what makes sense, right? Because these sites would have then been global sites. Our manufacturing are global sites. But now with this change, does the business case completely change? Because 40 to 50% of our volume is global, is outside the US. So now would you bring that manufacturing into the US? Or would you actually see manufacturing in Central Eastern Europe or Southern Europe? Would you actually take it to Mexico? How does the USMCA, etc. work through? So all these pieces are now back on the table. So we're doing a lot more scenario planning again, because the business case previously worked and we were actually bringing in more jobs. Over the last 10 years, we brought more than 400 manufacturing jobs into the US. And we were only scaling. So this has now changed a little bit to say, okay, we'll still probably bring, but we need to do the business cases again to see the volume implications of what it means. And you need to, in our case, China is one of our largest markets, second biggest market after the US. We had no manufacturing in China. We were shipping everything to China from the US. And which was, that's why we were a premium player in China. We were competing against all the local manufacturers, etc., as a premium player. Now this has made that, okay, do we go into China as our second largest market and have its manufacturing footprint there, which was never our intention. Our intention was always to be a European and US manufacturing-led organization. So now we need to make some adaptations, is my guess. So we look at the business case.
I think MedTech is unique. 70% of medical devices, are manufactured within the U.S. MedTech is a net exporter rather than the net importer. So those are important things. For us, we had a manufacturer partner in Colorado even before all the tariffs, so it does not change our strategy. But I think overall as an industry, it's important to keep that in mind, that MedTech is heavily U.S. focused because many reasons, but the quality and ability to control that, to have fast timelines to adjust, so that helps if at least some manufacturing is local.
We have time for one more question. Yes, in the black. Yes,
Hi, I'm Patricia. Thank you for all the great insights today. I'm somebody who's been a device and biotech CEO on and off for many years, so a lot of your advice rings true. And You spoke quite a bit about reimbursement and the importance of reimbursement. That is something, again, for decades we've been hearing that, but we are seeing a shift to more value-based care systems. I'm speaking with more and more of my peers who are facing DRG, bundle payments in which their medical devices are involved. So I was wondering, and then at that point, it becomes more a sale to hospital purchasing, right? And will they trade one set of devices or one device for another in order to realize more, I guess, flexibility in their, the margin they get on the bundle payment? Do you have any advice or thoughts about succeeding in this bundle payment type of environment? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Well, go. I can. Okay. I think it's a fundamental question that you ask, right? You heard the previous panel, and this is my individual view. Value-based healthcare, or call it population health, has been around for 10 years, as the previous panel has also said. We are still a heads and beds kind of an world. We're still heads and beds. We're still about, fee-for-service models. Value-based is a beautiful term, but eventually we all get to, let's put a head in a bed and drive that. And we need to change that. That's our role. As leaders, as healthcare leaders, that's our role to make that transition, get our providers, get ourselves in med device or wherever we work in the value chain to make that change and adaptation. So when you go to your question, the principles, whether in bundle payments or you're having a dedicated CPT code that reimburses you, remains the same. Per se, you need to show the clinical value, you need to show the financial value, and you need to show the operational value. That will never change. Can you show that the clinical outcomes are better for patients and easier for the physician to drive home? Are the financial outcomes, if you're now speaking in the bundle payment model, right, to the CFO or the CIO or the CHRO of the healthcare system or the IDN, are they actually driving the right financial outcomes for them and creating cost lower for them if they are in that value-based model? And the operational outcomes, right? Is the efficiency actually superior to what you will drive, right? Will your solution actually merge into their workflow more easily? Sometimes one of the misses that I will give you that we all try and do as startup or large companies, etc., is we try and change the workflow because we fall in love with our product and our idea and say, oh, we'll go and change the workflow. We will want that NP who's doing this or the MA or the PA doing this will change their workflow because my product is so superior. My solution is the best in the world. I'm changing the largest problem, but that's the most difficult thing to do. If you want your MA or PA or any clinical practitioner, NP, RN, etc., scrub nurse to pick up the phone or do something differently or key in on Epic differently, it doesn't work. So when you look at bundle payments or value-based healthcare, I would actually say focus on the workflow a lot more. Actually, you'll get more traction in the buying when it comes to at the IDNs of the health systems. But the logic will remain the same. I don't think the logic changes that much.
Did you want to say anything?
Sure. I always want to say something. Now, I think when you talk financials are important, it's not just, okay, we have a better technology, we save lives. We always think about hospitals as partners, and they are in a difficult situation too right now because there is all this MedTech that is about to get more expensive, but DRG costs are not going to automatically go up, right? So I think that issue becomes more and more important, and as CEOs of hospital system sometimes say, no margin, no mission, right? Even if they're mission-driven organization, they need to pay attention to their finances. So when you bring your technology, you need to explain how is it going to be more profitable for them. That's and have data, not just say like, hey, I think you don't need to have that extra nurse, for example, say, okay, we did a study with our technology, it takes 5 minutes, without it takes 35 minutes or whatever it is, right? And I think that will help them. But the issue is even broader because very often, again, as innovators, we make technologies more sophisticated, which often means less invasive, which means they move from hospitals to ambulatory surgical centers to clinics to home. And our reimbursement environment, the Medicare, was designed in the 60s. And they still operate under those laws very often, which makes a big disconnect. And so that's why I think it's important for us as an industry to speak with one voice, with the politicians, with the regulators, to make sure that CMS and private payers follow CMS very often, understand and reward technologies that saves healthcare costs overall. And that's what we're going to talk more in October at the MedTech conference about.
Right. Great plug. Well, I want to thank you all for sticking with us, and I invite you to thank our panelists for this wonderful session.